We're with a former Wallabies captain, a player of 83 Test matches, which included 3 World Cups, a dual John Eales medalist, an NGO co-founder, author, Harvard attendee, Masters holder. He's currently in his second term of federal parliament within the Senate, having doubled his support at the last federal election. He's a husband, he's a father, and despite all those achievements, a large number of the country would still say his greatest achievement is his unbelievable rig. Joining us from Canberra during a very busy parliament sitting week is none other than Senator David Pocock. Senator, welcome to The Great Cricketer.
Sam and Ian, thanks for having me.
Now, people might have seen in the title already that we're discussing with you today things like regulatory frameworks for online gambling, advertising, or how to correctly care about political and social issues in sports settings, avoiding the hypocrisy of being concerned about climate change but flying on jumbo jets. But really, Senator Pocock, summer's here and a lot of people will be looking to the Oracle, aka you, on getting the rig ready to go. Just before we kick off, any advice to kick things off for people in their summers?
Well, I'm one of the whitest guys out there, so summer involves a lot of sunscreen for me, big hats and sunscreen. When it comes to the body, it's been that was one of the biggest things, being a professional rugby player for 15 odd years, you're getting paid to exercise and stay in shape. And then all of a sudden you're doing another job, it's busy. And I was like, wow, this is what it's like for everyone else who doesn't get paid to train. So I don't know, I try and at least do something every day, a bit of weights or something on the bike, go for a run, get out for walks. Nothing too crazy, actually, but really enjoy it. Have enjoyed staying active.
And obviously touch footy at lunchtimes when you're allowed to. We'll come to that in a second. But I asked the same question to a friend of the show, Phil Waugh, recently. But the first question that must be asked is, where is Rocky Elsom?
Rocky Elsom was always an enigma. One of the truly unique characters in the game. Super smart guy. I'm not actually sure where he is at the moment, but I hope he is safe and well.
Well answered, Senator Pocock. This summer, Aussies, as usual, are going to get smashed by gambling advertising. It follows a winter where we've been smashed, and that's preceded by years and years of it across the board. The late MP, Peter Murphy, produced the Murphy Review. Before she died in 2023, it contained 31 unanimously supported recommendations to reduce gambling harm. It included a phased comprehensive ban on online gambling advertising. So far, Labor hasn't moved on these recommendations. It's well established that whatever people's relationship to gambling, the only people I can think of who've asked for more of it were Roy and HG over the weekend, when HG said, if anything, punters want more gambling advertising on their TVs. And online. Now, Senator Pocock, if Australia wants a reduction in online gambling advertising and they want to stop being hammered by it, why isn't it happening?
In short, a lack of political will, I think mainly from the Prime Minister, actually, talking to people in the Labor Party. As a country, we really pride ourselves on punching above our weight. Whenever we're playing on the world stage, Olympics, World Championships, you're seeing Australians from a relatively small country out there with the best. And we love that, and we're rightly very proud of it. When it comes to gambling losses, we are by far the biggest losers in the world. As a country, we're losing $31 billion every single year on gambling. And what gambling advertising has done is normalize it. So young people now, 3/4 of young people, because they've been hammered with so many gambling ads through their childhood, they now just think, well, the only way to enjoy sport is you gamble. And gambling is just a normal part of enjoying sport. And I think that is hugely problematic for a country that already clearly has a problem. And we're just setting up young people for disaster. So the reason why we haven't seen change, despite the great work done by the late Peter Murphy and the Parliamentary inquiry, this was really, as a relatively new politician, there's a lot of argy-bargy in there and, ideological debates and whatever it might be. But if you actually look at the work this committee did, this is Parliament at its best. This is something that we should be proud of as a country. A parliamentary committee looked at issues around problem gambling and came up with a really clear set of recommendations to actually tackle it. And we've seen a Prime Minister who, time and again, rather than actually going with his colleagues' work with the Parliament's recommendations, has sort of wheeled out talking points from the gambling industry. So, unfortunately, I think it actually just comes down to that the Prime Minister doesn't think this is something that actually is urgent.
You mentioned kids there, Dave. You said 1 in 3 Australian kids aged between 12 and 17 gamble. I mean, like, how predatory are some of these companies in relation to their advertising?
I really wasn't, we know we're getting smashed with ads. Like if you watch a sporting event, listen to a podcast, whatever it might be, you're just seeing them and you're hearing them. It's really only been over the last 4 years as a senator engaging with researchers who are actually looking at all the different ways that gambling companies are advertising that you realize just how shocking it is. A lot of these companies now actually using sort of cartoon-like imagery and logos. For young men in particular, they're paying former NBA stars or influencers a lot of money to make ads which are really funny, and really worryingly, when researchers talk to young men about it, they love the ads. So hugely problematic. And we now know that there are more Australians under the age of 18 who are actually gambling, who have some sort of sports betting account, than play a whole bunch of sports, basketball and a number of other sports. We've got 750,000 under 18s gambling, which is a big problem. And that is why the Murphy review said we need a full ban on all gambling ads, phased in over 3 years to give sports and broadcasters time to make other arrangements. But you simply can't have a partial ban. In the past, when they've tried partial bans, the gambling companies have just advertised more in other spots on TV or on digital or whatever it might be.
So Dave, you said off air that we could call you Dave. It just feels good to say Senator. Like if we accept that Aussies don't like being smashed by gambling ads, and that's not an ideological comment. That's established in this inquiry. It's just 200 pages. The research is done. You can have any position you like on gambling without being a wowser about it. People can do it or whatever, but the large number of Aussies don't like being smashed by ads. Like, for a lot of people who are listening to this show or watching this show, you mentioned earlier that there just isn't the political will for it. But could you dive in for us, Luddites, I suppose, or novices, on what that means, like what the mechanics are that would lead Prime Minister Albanese, who sat on our couch here, to be fair to him as well, that would lead him to go, even though Aussies don't want this and I represent them, I'm going to keep it for now. Like what is his incentive or their incentive to go against the will of his constituents?
Yeah, I mean, as a new politician and as an independent, this is a huge frustration for me. And I know many Australians, and this is part of the reason I got into politics, was I was so frustrated by, you have the big problems, you have the majority of Australians say, just fix the damn problem. And then you have politicians either not doing anything or coming up with some, half-assed, solution that doesn't actually tackle the root cause of the issue. When it comes to this, we've seen huge pushback from, say, Peter V'landys and the NRL. They make a lot of money from gambling, and it's gone from, gambling companies simply advertising to the NRL actually getting a cut from bets that are placed on the NRL. And I think that's a really unhealthy relationship to be so close, sport and gambling to be so close. We've seen many examples over the years of athletes getting themselves into trouble when it comes to not just problem gambling, but sort of insider tips and all the rest, match fixing. So one, I think that's really problematic, and that's a big part of the Murphy report was saying we really have to try and break this nexus between gambling and sport. Nobody is saying all gambling should be banned, but we can't normalize it like we are. And we shouldn't be smashed with ads. If you're over 18 and want to have a punt, go for it. But we have to have some regulations in place that actually, one, protect young people, and then ensure that people who recognize they have a problem can, one, get the help they need, and not have, as you said, kind of this predatory behavior, offering them inducements, emails, even if they have sort of self-excluded on BetStop. At estimates, I was tabling evidence that some companies that know someone has a gambling problem has actually gone to the length of excluding themselves from BetStop, of gambling companies on Melbourne Cup Day sending them an email saying, hey, we know you've self-excluded, so just a reminder that if you wanted to bet again, you'd have to re-register. That's such problematic behavior. So, we've seen the NRL push back, AFL push back. Clearly, commercial television, it's no secret, has been in trouble financially. They've been pushing back because there's a lot of advertising that goes on TV. But there are solutions to ensure that we do have free TV, that it is a viable industry. I think it's a really important part of our democracy to have free-to-air television. But there's ways around that. We could put a levy on gambling. We could do all sorts of things. But instead of doing that, I think we're seeing the government, the Prime Minister, sort of listen to those voices and say, well, this is all just too hard, when you have 80% of Australians saying, get rid of these ads.
I wonder if you have a sense, Dave, of how far-reaching this will go, because there's an Australian betting company that has its own Snapchat filter. Spotify have been in trouble quite recently, actually, for gambling ads playing during Bluey and Frozen songs. Is there an end to how far-reaching these companies will go with their advertising if nothing is done?
Well, that's the concern, is not much is going to change. You may see them say, okay, well, maybe let's just have it, no gambling ads an hour before sport, an hour after sport. But as you said, it's just so pervasive. It's everywhere. And I've raised those examples with the government, saying, how can someone listening on Spotify with their kids be hearing gambling ads? It just is not good enough. And to go back to the Murphy report, that's why they said it just has to be a full blanket ban on gambling advertising. That's the only way that we're going to be able to deal with it. And we've seen other countries do that, and we've seen other countries have good results. I guess maybe just to go back to your previous question, one of the other things that the gambling companies, the sort of gambling lobby, and really worryingly the Prime Minister has said is, well, if you crack down on ads and those sorts of things, then people will go to illegal offshore gambling sites. One, they're illegal, so there are a heap of process in place to actually pull those sites down, and that's happening all the time. But two, there's actually no evidence for that. We've seen the gambling lobby point to Nordic countries and saying, well, it's happened there. And we saw on Four Corners, they actually sat down with the regulators over there, and they said, no, we haven't seen any evidence of that happening. So it's a lot of, propaganda and I guess pushing back by vested interests. I think we should be saying, well, what's good for our kids? And, as someone who, as a former professional athlete who, I just got so much out of rugby. I loved it from I can ever remember. As a kid, all I wanted to do was play rugby at the highest level. Managed to do that. And, you kind of have to ask, well, what is sport for? I think sport is for all the things that we know and love it for, not for flogging off some harmful product that we know is doing a lot of harm.
In so many conversations around social or cultural or political issues, you will hear people say, well, government can't be the answer to all of these things. Now, it occurs to me that government is really important in this particular issue, like regulatory frameworks and actual legislation. But separate to that, do you think there should be any pressure or microscope on those who commercially benefit from gambling advertising? We're coming up to a summer of cricket. in Australia? Should we be looking at the extent to which Cricket Australia is partnered with wagering service providers, or others who carry or support these, this approach?
I think we should be, and I think public opinion is definitely turning on this. When you survey fans of different sports, they don't want to see the gambling ads. They recognise what it's doing to their kids, and I hear the kind of pushback and saying, well, and I see it on social media, stop pushing for a nanny state. This is ridiculous. Personal responsibility, all these things, and for adults, I probably agree. If you're over 18 and you want to gamble, go for it. But to have a system where we have no regulation, which means that, or we have sort of self-regulation, the gambling companies self-regulate, means that you're setting young people up for failure. And that's the angle that I take on this. This is about protecting young Australians who are still forming their view of the world, what is normal, what they love. And so you can say, no nanny state, but some of the same people who say that are taking hundreds of millions, like literally hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars from the state for their sport. So it goes both ways, I think.
In my experience, like anecdotally, Higgins actually raised this with the Prime Minister earlier in the year. Whenever anyone takes on things that produce social or health ills, we're usually met with scare campaigns. I mean, these organisations are well resourced, and they have experts in persuasion and communication, etc. And I tend to find that it's I've seen this for decades now, that it's regularly trotted out that if we reduce wagering revenue, that junior sport will die. I mean, this is the comeback to the question about what about the kids. It's like, what about the kids? Because it occurs to me that a lot of junior sport, according to these organisations, is propped up by problem gamblers. How do you deal with those kinds of responses? The response that says like, well, I'm sorry, there's too much gambling revenue in junior sport, and if we don't have this revenue, junior sport will die and the kids won't be able to play.
Yeah, it's often used, I guess on the East Coast when it comes to pokies, that is used as an example. If you look at WA, there's no pokies outside of the casino, and they seem to have community sports grounds. So it doesn't seem to affect them that much when it comes to sports betting. Again, I just keep coming back to the bigger question of what is sport for? If sport, and sport is such an important part of Australian culture and provides so much to Australians. And I think particularly if you go sort of to smaller towns, regional areas, sports clubs are often the hub of that community. And if as a country we can't find a way to fund those sorts of places that are clearly providing a huge sort of social good in a way that doesn't rely on gambling advertising, then we're doing something wrong as a country. We're one of the richest countries in the world. I know a lot of Australians don't feel like that, but we are, and I think this is really about priority. So I think there's a whole bunch of ways we could fund those things. Australians, I think, wager about $240 billion a year. You could clip the ticket a tiny amount on that, and I think you could more than compensate all the community sports clubs across the country. So there's ways to do it, and I don't know, I'm just worried that I think that is a pretty convenient line for vested interests to sort of roll out when they're under pressure.
What kind of backlash do you personally face from the industry by trying to take a stand on this?
Not a lot personally. Obviously got kicked out of the Parliamentary Sports Club for raising concerns about the Parliamentary Sports Club's links to the gambling lobby, but no, overwhelming support from I'm a senator for the ACT. I view my job as working for people in the ACT. I vote on their behalf. And I hear from people all the time about the urgent need for this. And when you actually sit down and, talk to people who've lost mainly brothers and sons to gambling addictions, and the role that advertising and sort of the predatory behavior of inducements and all the rest played in their death, it's hard not to. I just can't stop pushing hard. I think this is something that Australians want, and it's tragic that we haven't seen the political will to actually deal with it. And I think one of the things that really strikes me when you talk to families and you talk to people who are sort of recovering gambling addicts is, as men, it kind of men feel a lot of shame around this because they feel like they should be able to deal with it, just have the self-control to deal with it. And so often they don't tell many people until they are so deep in the hole that it is clear to everyone around them. And that shame just eats people up. And I think as a society, we have to find ways to put some safeguards in place so that we're, one, protecting young people, but then ensuring that we're treating this as a public health issue, because clearly it has big implications for Australians and then their families.
I mean, in America right now, they're having a conversation about gambling, slightly different circumstances, but the New York Times published an article last week by June Lee titled "Gambling is Killing Sports and Consuming America." Now, this was on the back of arrests of an NBA player and coach on allegations of insider sports betting. Now, that was specifically more related to sort of match fixing than advertising per se, right? But and you may be hesitant to comment on matters of the US anyway. But what I found particularly interesting, Senator, was this. A 2025 survey found that 21% of sports bettors say they verbally abused an athlete in person or online. Now, we've spoken to many players, captains of the country, that have experienced that exact thing of getting abused. Friends or family members of these players have been abused, saying things like, "You've ruined my multi." That sort of behaviour as well. Right? I mean, I wonder, have you as a former player experienced that sort of thing as well?
Well, I mean, I was I was a loose forward, so in my position, it was often fairly unglamorous work. We often weren't the people scoring the first try or kicking the first goal or whatever people were punting on. So not really. I mean, I copped a fair bit of abuse for performances and other things over the years, but not necessarily that. But that's really sad.
Why allow Richie McCaw to be so offside?
He's off his feet.
What are the odds of that? I mean, again, like, this all came up in the Murphy report. Like, I don't know. I haven't seen better work done in the Parliament, and I don't say that lightly. Like, it really is an amazing piece of work. And one of the things that Peter Murphy says in her foreword to the report is that Australia would be diminished if sport was to be so captured by gambling revenue that providing an opportunity for betting came to be seen as its primary purpose. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. If our culture shifts from just loving sport for what it is to loving watching sport because you can bet on it, and abusing players who don't score the first try or kick the first goal or take the first wicket or whatever it might be, we're losing something big there. I think there's a lot to fight for here.
I mean, the Parliamentary Sports Club debacle, I felt worked really well for you politically. It was like Streisand effect stuff, really. But
it was a real own goal, I think.
Yeah, like, I mean, I wanted to know, just even from a professional sportsman's ego perspective, like, I know Robbie Dean's left you out of a few sides, but have you otherwise been, dropped from any other sports team in your life until now?
I've probably been dropped down the batting order a few times at primary school for not scoring enough runs, but it was a really bizarre thing. And I don't know, like, it felt really weird to me to learn that the Parliamentary Sports Club was taking corporate sponsorships from many companies, but also the gambling lobby, which allowed them to essentially come and play sport with parliamentarians. Like, I'd actually have no issue if the lobbyists just rocked up in the morning to play sport, but the fact that they were paying for that access really, I don't know, it really didn't it didn't sit well with me, and so raised concerns privately. When I raised them publicly, got booted. I still haven't heard from the club to say I'm officially invited back, but probably won't be rejoining anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, as if like sponsoring the Parliamentary Sports Club hasn't turned up on a comms plan internally somewhere, only for them to say oh no, that's nothing. It's just a bit of bunt.
Yeah, exactly.
Dave, just talk more socially. A lot of people may be listening to this or viewing this who play cricket, for example, and I've just gone through puberty. So who may feel like the act of having a strident political opinion alone leaves you open in this culture to being ostracized or branded a rare bloke. It's not controversial to say there can be a wariness around people with an intellectual streak in Australia. If you're sitting in the pavilion watching the game and you've got a broadsheet open, or maybe on your iPad or something now, but rather than looking at the social pages, people might look at you with a furrowed brow if you're reading a book or something like that. What was your experience when it came to the relationship you had with teammates or friends, given that you've been someone who's always cared about political and social issues?
I mean, I found within teams there were always really interesting conversations happening, and I think guys are often a lot smarter than they let on, or I think teams are having far more interesting conversations than most people would assume. A lot of the backlash came from, I don't know, the public, I guess, and there, a lot of people saying, just stick to rugby, none of this politics, and there's no doubt that it leaves you open to criticism, particularly if you have a bad game. A whole bunch of people are going to jump up and down and say, well, see, if you focus a bit less on this other thing that you've commented on a few times and just trained a bit harder, or whatever it might be, you'd be better. So I think that is definitely a barrier to more athletes actually just talking about things that they care about. And we've seen athletes over the years talk about a range of things, and I think just be active, engaged citizens and say, well, I think this cause matters, or this issue matters, and I've got a voice, so I'm going to talk about it. I mean, for me, I guess it was something I thought about a lot. I knew what it was like to be that young player that just idolized my favorite rugby players and wanted to be them. And when I was then playing for the Wallabies, you kind of think, well, wrongly or rightly, I have this platform, and what do you do with it? And I figured there's all these things that, rugby is important. It's such a big part of my life, but I think there's these other things that are just as important, probably a lot more important in the scheme of things. And I want to be able to at least talk about them, not in a preachy way, but in a way that really invites people into that conversation. And so for me, being involved in a contact football code where clearly homophobia was and still is an issue, I wanted to talk about that because I thought that was something that we all had a responsibility to try and create a more inclusive environment. And then around climate and the environment, I just think that is something that our generation will get judged on in the future.
Pat Cummins talks about climate and the environment, and the comment sections in various places don't like that.
No.
I mean, have you done much work with Pat before? What are your views on where he sits with it?
Oh yeah, I've done a bit with Pat. Stared into his eyes. What a good looking rooster.
And now he's injured. That's interesting.
No, really, love what Pat does. I think not just his commitment to different issues, but I think really the way that he's gone about it and really tried to again draw people into a bigger conversation. He's a great bloke, and I think a real example of how you can both be the best fast bowlers in the world, captain the Australian cricket team, and actually care and say let's actually ensure that future generations of Australians get to enjoy this great game. And I'm going to work with clubs around the country to put solar on and not only bring down their bills, but actually be part of this big problem when it comes to carbon emissions and decarbonisation. And he's obviously opened himself up to a bunch of criticism, but doesn't seem to have affected his ability to do what he does.
Usman was down in Canberra a few weeks ago on a range of matters. Couldn't quite grab the Prime Minister, I think, but
I think you did actually chat to him in the end.
He got him. Pardon me. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's another guy, Usman, who I think again talks about things so eloquently, and just such a great guy. Really enjoyed spending the day with him. I think you got a bit of an insight look into how crazy Parliament House can be on a sitting day. But he came. He talked about gambling. We had a round table with experts, people with lived experience, and then he obviously talked about Gaza as well, and the need for the Australian government to step up there, and was really well received. I guess that's the thing you see in Parliament House is how much people love sport. There was an event with Pat Cummins and Cricket for Climate a few months ago. Long queue of politicians to get a photo with Pat. So you see the power of sport, and some of the same politicians who will, when they don't like something, say, "Well, sports and politics shouldn't mix." They're often the first person there trying to get the photo and chuck it on the Instagram.
Yeah, sport and politics shouldn't mix when they're not the political views that I agree with. Yeah,
exactly.
I just on the gambling online gambling advertising senator. Do you think it's moving in the right direction?
I'm really worried about where it's at. We've basically seen no action for the last few years. This report landed. The government has done a range of things, and you'll hear the Prime Minister sort of roll out this list of things they've done. Bet stop, adding sort of the disclaimer to the end of gambling ads. Pretty much all that stuff was actually started under the coalition. There was a report, I think in 2018, that recommended a bunch of those things. There was some work done, maybe not enough done, but to Labor's credit, they then implemented them. So they haven't responded to the Murphy report, and that's the big one. That is I think this is what we actually need to do as a country to start to deal with this big problem. So myself and a whole bunch of others on the crossbench, independents and minor parties will keep pushing them on it, but we'll have to wait and see. They've got a huge majority. Labor have a huge majority in the House of Representatives. They could do anything with that, and hopefully implementing the Murphy report in full is one of the things they do, but we'll have to wait and see.
Just to finish up, David Pocock, also known as Senator, on Friday, 3:40 p.m. After a busy week. I'm just taking this from an article written about you last year. It says, major changes are afoot for the Pococks. With their small border collie, mini poodle cross Bronte, the pair playfully declare themselves dildos, double income little dog owners. But soon they will add one more with the arrival of a child in November. Accepting the congratulations, David jokes, thanks, we had unprotected sex. Firstly, Senator, congratulations on both being a former dildo and now a father. Secondly, a lot of people admire you greatly. That's verbatim, by the way. I'm truly quite...
That is a good lesson for people that nothing is off the record.
Oh no!
When I said that, I assumed we were just sitting in our lounge room, just having a chat. Didn't realize that Angus was going to use the journo was going to use everything I'd said. But he turns one in a couple of weeks, which is
wow,
been a pretty crazy year, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Look, I can't speak on behalf of our audience, but I think people find you refreshing, and for a Harvard attendee and a Wallabies captain, Jules John Eales medalist and NGO, somewhat normal for a politician, and that kind of language is how people talk. So just wanted to say Congratulations on your child, and do you have further political ambitions? Because people want this.
I mean, one of the great things about being an independent is that that's kind of the extent of it. You've just got to be the very best representative for me. It's for the ACT. If you're in the lower house, it's for your electorate that you can be. I do have a lot of people hit me up about like what's next, and how do you actually scale this sort of type of politics. I don't know what that looks like. I've certainly been so frustrated with politics that I decided to get into it. I had no idea what on earth I was getting myself into, but there are actually there's a lot of good people in this place, but I think the system at times just doesn't deliver for people. So we'll have to wait and see. At the moment, I'm enjoying it on mostly. Feel like I'm making a bit of a difference, but there's a huge amount to do. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Senator Pocock, thanks for joining the Grade Cricketer Friday afternoon.
Thank you both so much. That was fun.